Hey, what's good guys? This is Chris from WearTesters.com. Today we got the performance review on these bad boys right here. This is probably my favorite Curry to play in thus far, and I think it's going to be the majority of people that actually play in Currys, their favorite as well. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the performance review. So the traction pattern on these guys is not quite Curry 2 level, which I find to be like the best of the best as far as the Curry mainline signatures. And then from there, I would pick the Curry 4 as the second best. These I'd probably pick as the third best. I love the circular section that is on the lateral end. The interior portion is kind of a cross-hatched type of pattern, and it's supposed to like represent stucco from Curry's old house that he grew up in. It's a reach, in my opinion, if we're looking at storytelling. I would have loved to have just seen this spiral pattern just make its way all the way around, because that's all the shoe really needs other than herringbone. However, this cross-hatched section did not perform super poorly. It's just that that was the one area that you could notice when dust would really build up. You'd have to clean that out quite a bit, and then you'd be on your way. The left side right here, like I said, with the spirals is just fantastic. I mean, if you're moving and you go and stop or change direction, which this is typically the primary kind of like focus area on most people's feet, especially for a guard. If you're moving laterally, that's predominantly the area that you're going to be hitting, and in that sense it does a great job. Again, it's just not as aggressive as the previous two models that I mentioned. The Curry 2 probably has the most like aggressive traction pattern I've seen on a shoe in quite some time, and then the Curry 4 was just fantastic. So these guys are just below that. They still have great grip on the court. I took these outdoors for a little bit, and surprisingly enough, I didn't have any issues outside, which I thought was weird. You know, if you play in these indoors or outdoors, I think you're going to be perfectly fine with them. I wouldn't expect them to last too long if you do play in them outdoors primarily, but for the time that they do last, you're going to receive some really good traction. Now, the cushion is probably the best part of the shoe, at least as far as like recent Under Armour models go. As most of you guys know, they've been rocking with us and with Under Armour for quite some time. They used to have some of the best cushion in the game, which was Micro G. They switched things over to Charge at one point. I don't know really why, but for whatever reason they decided to do that. Some Charge was good, some Charge was just, I mean, it just felt really hard. And then we got to a point in the Curry lines where, you know, speaking of the 4 and the 5, where there's literally no cushion whatsoever. It's like you're as close to the ground as possible. And in the 4, it didn't feel bad. In the 5, I didn't like it too much. It felt kind of slappy. This guy right here is what I was saying earlier, is gonna just kind of appease most people. So a lot of people don't mind, you know, a lack of cushion if that's their preference. Some people that have a preference for cushion, obviously the Curry line is a shoe that would not cater towards them typically, but this is kind of like the best of both worlds. They've implemented hover full length. It's the entire midsole. It's not sectioned off or anything like it was in the Hover Havoc. And I feel like this is kind of like their best that they've done so far as giving everybody a little bit of something that they want. If you are one of those players that loved the Currys of the past, you love that low profile feel, the court feel, you're still gonna enjoy these. If you did not love the Currys of the past because they were too low and they had no cushion, you are also gonna enjoy these because they give you exactly what you want, which is some cushion underfoot. It's not as bouncy as the Hover stuff that we have used in some of the running models, and it shouldn't be because it's a different sport entirely. It's not a linear sport. It's more of a lateral sport. So these guys have been fine-tuned and tweaked for lateral movements. The thing that I like though is that the designer even said this, is that they kind of like designed this shoe like a running sneaker because of how much these players move on the court. But I found them to feel like is closer to a tennis shoe, which is a little bit of both. It's got that on-court coverage that you need, but it also moves with you like a runner would. And for those of you guys that play basketball outside, you probably already know what I'm talking about, because if you use the tennis shoe to play basketball in, they are exceptional. So if you're looking for an outdoor shoe, just put it out there. You can always go with a tennis model. But the cushion on these guys was fantastic. I loved it. There's literally no complaints. It's not anything that you have to wait for or break in. It feels better over time, as most shoes do, and I think that most of you guys are going to like these. The material on the shoe is full-on knit from heel to forefoot. There's nothing that is not knit as the main structure of the shoe. You do have some fuse overlays for, you know, some integrity right there at the toe, as well as the eyelet panel. That's just for some extra support right there, because you don't want the knit to rip. And what I like about this knit is that it wasn't like super stretchy or anything. They kind of got this knit just right. The Curry 5 had an internal knit booty, and then it had the external kind of anafoam shell. And while that worked well together, at least in my opinion, I like the way that this feels. It feels a little bit more uniform. It feels a little bit more finished, more refined. It shows that they're able to evolve what they've done in the past while still keeping it in line with, you know, what they've done before, which I really enjoy. Now, the fit overall I felt was true to size. Initially, when I first put them on, my toe was right there at the edge, which I personally like, but I wasn't sure how most people were going to feel about it. And once I've broken the shoe in, I can say comfortably that I do prefer this shoe true to size. I think most people will as well. I did feel like there was initially some dead space above the forefoot area. Like I was saying before in the material section, this is a knit. This forefoot section of the knit is reinforced a little bit. And so it just felt like there was some like bubbling above my foot. That went away after I started breaking the shoe in. It kind of like warmed up everything. And while it didn't overstretch it to where it doesn't feel like secure, it just made it to where it was like a nice sock. Like you just put it on and you're pretty much good to go. And as far as lockdown is concerned, it got better over time. The initial wear, it felt like it was a little bubbly. Once everything kind of like heats up and molds to your foot, it's going to be perfectly fine. The flat laces help as well because there is not a lot of padding in the tongue area. So normally you would get some lace pressure on the top of your foot, kind of make your foot go to sleep. With the flat laces, it doesn't happen. I'm able to tie these as tightly as I can while still feeling comfortable, and I don't have any loose fitting areas or anything like that, which I personally prefer because I typically don't like this type of setup where it's a one piece. I like a tongue because you can actually like adjust things. So being that this is a one piece, it's not a bad one piece. I actually did like them on court. The overall support is exactly what you'd expect out of a Curry. Currys tend to have great traction and great support because Curry is a player that just kind of like needs to be able to plant on his forefoot quickly and then be able to rise up for a jump shot. And these guys basically do just that for you. As a shooter myself, I really enjoy this type of setup. And like I said before, it's got enough cushion to where you're not just getting, you know, support and stability. So the forefoot area is still wide and flat, which I love. You got additional flex grooves in there for additional mobility. And then this section is extended just enough to where it acts as an outrigger, and you do actually sit inside portions of the midsole, most notably in the heel right there. That's kind of like an additional reinforced heel counter in addition to the one that's already back there. And then they also added this, what they're calling a speed plate right here. It's just a TPU plate that runs full length across the lateral side of the shoe. It allows it so that the hover can be hover without it tipping over or anything like that. And then they've also extended it right there in the forefoot lateral section, again, to reinforce that area just because it is a little bit wide, but not super wide. And then without having to extend a ton of rubber right there, which would typically add a little bit of weight, instead they just kind of stiffen up that section with the TPU plate, which actually works really well. There's also a TPU arch plate for torsional support. It works just the way that you would expect it to. It doesn't allow too much twisting or anything like that. They probably could have left it off because of the speed plate. That actually acts as a torsional plate as well, but having them both in there for good measure is never a bad thing. And that pretty much takes care of it. This is probably like my favorite Under Armour shoe to play in right now. I loved the Curry 4s. I did not like the Curry 5s, and this guy right here kind of like makes it all up. I really like the way that these feel. The cushion is just like, you got to try it. It's not micro G level cushion, but it's still really, really nice. It gives you a good blend of court feel and cushion, which I enjoy. The materials, I would love to see some leathers and stuff like that, but for knit and for being a one-piece booty, it worked just fine. Traction was solid. The price hasn't increased whatsoever. It's still 130 bucks, which I think is great. And again, that pretty much takes care of it. If you have any other questions, you can hit the link in the description box below. It'll head you over to WearTesters.com where you can check out their weight and their scores. If you have any questions that were not answered in the video, feel free to leave them down below in the comment section, and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. And with that being said, thank you once again. Happy New Year. And until next time, guys, have a good one.
I do have a question though. Considering tennis is primarily an outdoor sport, why don't they make basketball shoes out of the same materials they make tennis shoes out of?
Because they want you to buy more basketball shoes.
Then why don't they make tennis shoes like basketball shoes so people will buy more tennis shoes?
Because tennis players are not idiots. No offense to basketball players, but like that's something that I think is always interesting, is how marketing works. You know, marketing, like a brand, any brand will tell you something. For the most part, people just take it. They're like, okay, if Jordan brand releases the Jordan 11s in a black and purple or Concord colorway, and then they give you a Space Jam box and they say these are Space Jams, even though they're the PE that he wore, the majority of people think that that's the Space Jam, even though it's not. It's a PE, you know. But they couldn't just release the shoe as a PE because people don't care. Straight up, like, people are like, who cares about a PE? New generation people. But if you put a cartoon bunny on it, and all of a sudden everybody's like, hey, they're Space Jams, that's cool. And so they like want to buy it. And it's the same thing with sports shoes. It's like basketball players could, and a lot of them do, go and buy a tennis shoe and get a way more durable product than current generation basketball shoes. But because it's labeled as tennis, people are like, no, that's a tennis shoe. But volleyball players are smart. Volleyball players will both. There are some shoes that are like made specifically for volleyball, but volleyball is a sport like tennis where the movements in there are very similar to a basketball, and those are played on the same floors usually.
Right.
And so they go and buy basketball shoes. So they not only get the performance features they want, but they also get the looks. Because that's something that tennis shoes and volleyball shoes don't look cool. But these look, well, depending on the person, but these look cool. An Air Jordan looks cool. A Kyrie looks cool, but there's no Kyrie volleyball shoe. So like people will just go and buy a Kyrie shoe. It's just all marketing. What you marketing about?
Nothing.
Your goofy ass, get out of here. Whoa. Man, I always do that. I've been doing that for 10 years.